Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now on our 51st episode, 51, so 5-1, episode of 2025. It goes by really quick, doesn't it? Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Five for Breakfast. Well, in Washington today, the Senate Commerce Committee is holding a full committee oversight hearing of the FCC, with the full commission testifying. This is the first hearing with all the FCC commissioners present since 2020, so it's been a long time, providing lawmakers a chance to question and hear updates firsthand on the agency's leadership. Separately, a bipartisan group of senators are urging NTI to maintain state flexibility to use the leftover BEAD allocations as intended in the infrastructure law. The letter, led by Senators Deb Fischer and Ben Ray Lujan of the Senate Commerce Committee, requests clarity on how NTI will manage non-deployment funds to close the digital divide. Looking over at the House, the Rules Committee teed up H.R. 4776, the SPEED Act, for floor consideration this week. The SPEED Act proposes changes to the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, aimed at streamlining and expediting environmental review process, including narrowing the scope of review. So while this legislation is advanced through the House Natural Resource Committee, and while our primary focus has been on the Broadband Telecommunications Rail Act and other permitting reform measures moving through the House Energy and Commerce, we're keeping a close eye on this bill. Overall, the development seems to point on progress on permitting reform, and suggests that policymakers on both sides of the aisle are understanding this remains a significant barrier that impacts deployment and needs to be addressed. And then at the White House last week, President Trump signed an executive order ensuring a national policy framework for artificial intelligence, directing the FCC and NTI to begin work on federal actions to preempt current and potential state AI laws through FCC proceedings and additional restrictions on BEAD and non-deployment funds. So while the FBA advocates deploying more fiber to support AI infrastructure, we hope to see the leftover BEAD funds used to enhance AI infrastructure and streamlining permitting process and workforce development initiatives. And over the next 90 days, we're going to continue our conversation with NTI on the importance of the BEAD non-deployment funds to continue to support the deployment of fiber infrastructure for these unserved communities, and to be able to help enable the technology of the future. Today on Five for Breakfast, today at the FCC, FBA is filing its reply comments to Section 253 Notice of Inquiry, examining state and local regulatory barriers that will today wireline telecommunications infrastructure. So a lot going on in D.C. this week, here at the last week of the year for Congress to be in session. And last week, we held our premier member meeting in Palm Springs. We had nearly 200 executives from our top member companies. And wow, what an amazing group of people. Everyone was so engaged as we set our course for 2026. And speaking of 2026, we're going to be kicking off our regional Fiber Connect workshops in Oklahoma City on Thursday, February 5th at the Akana Resort, with a focus on tribal broadband. So you're not going to want to miss that. And last week on Five for Breakfast, our guest was one of my favorites, Dr. Chris Ali, Pioneer Chair in Telecommunications and Professor of Telecommunications at Penn State, discussed what's next after BEAD. Dr. Ali travels the country exploring the need and benefits of rural broadband, and his insights are so helpful in framing key broadband policies. So Chris is getting ready to release his latest book on Where Wires End, Stories from the Digital Divide, so you want to check that. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Fire for Breakfast, our guest is Mike Render, the principal for RVA Research, to discuss the 2025 fiber deployment numbers. This is the research results that you guys have all been waiting for. How do we do in 2025, and where are we in our mission to get every home passed with fiber? Mike is a recognized expert in North America fiber broadband rollout and is FVA's longtime research partner. RVA is a nationally and internationally known firm with over 30-year history of service to a wide range of organizations, and he has recently expanded research into the growing fields of 5G and smart city technology deployment. Brenda received numerous industry awards for his work, in the broadband arena and for RVA's research influence on FCC policy. Oh, and as a Broadband Community's Cornerstone recipient. So we did have that in there, Mike. So with that, I will turn over things to Mr. Render. And please type in your questions as we go and work those into the conversation after Mike shares his results. So welcome,
Great.
Mike.
Thank you, Gary. So I am going to go through some results at fiber speed here. We have quite a few slides to get through, but I want to try to give a pretty complete picture here of what's going on. Just for background, we try to get our data from many sources: the government, FCC data, the analysis that public companies release, multiple surveys, things we do on consumers and providers, and other surveys that are out there. And it's important to triangulate because no source of data is perfect. Of course, our data isn't perfect either, but we try our best to get things zeroed in as much as possible. Well, the big reveal, how did we do last year? Another record, as you can see. After a trough of disappointment for a while in the middle of the last 10 years or so ago, we've been on a steady upstream with one decline in 2020. And we now hit nearly 12 million homes, new homes marketed. That's passed and also ready for sale. And that's what we try to measure, not just homes passed. But we're up to nearly 12 million, which is an exciting milestone. It's hard to believe. That's about 1,000 times bigger than my first report, which was 12,000. So we've made quite a bit of progress. Next up is looking at cumulative. And here we can see in terms of all passings, we're at nearly 100 million now. Again, hard to believe we're at that stage. 84.6 unique homes marketed. In other words, some of those homes also have 2 passings, and in a few cases, even 3, as we'll see in the next slide. We're almost up to 40 million homes connected now. Again, a record number. Canada, we cover Canada as well. These are some numbers we pulled together just a few months ago for the Canadian meeting, but you can see up to 12.4 unique homes marketed. I think it's about 14.5 total passings, 6.3 million connected. And Canada is actually ahead of us in terms of the penetration of homes, of households. As you can see, the red line has surpassed the blue line. That they're further ahead. Although from here on out, it gets tougher because their rural is much more rural than the U.S. rural. So it's going to be a slog to get all the way there. But they're making good progress. Number of homes with redundant passings keeps increasing. We're now up to about 16% that have more than one passing, 15% 2, 1% 3 or 4. So, people are seeing the need to compete with fiber and go into certain places with another fiber. Despite the speed of deployment, take rates have also even creeped up a bit, which is significant because, it takes about 5 years once you build and start marketing to home for most of the passings to become actual connections. So as you can see, getting a slight increase despite all this pressure of new builds is pretty amazing, exciting. And the FBA set goals for 2030 to be past, 90%, I think it is, of homes and maybe 50% of connections. And you can see we're making good progress towards that. On the right-hand side, you can see the red line. We're making much faster progress than previous wireline builds, such as coax in the middle of the last century and copper telephone in the first part of the last century. And I think a good part of that, it needs to be credited to the FBA, to the good work that Gary and past people even before then have done, and all the teams, the great team involved, from staff to volunteers, in pushing this narrative and getting the facts and figures out about fiber and what it can do, and making policy decisions as well, helping policy discussion. A diverse set is advancing fiber broadband. It used to be more dominant, the big telecoms, but in 2017 it was only 12% of other kinds of providers. Now it's 40%. Competitive providers especially, that ranges for everybody from big players like Google and now T-Mobile pulling in larger competitive players, to very small wireless players who are getting involved in wireless. So it's in fiber. So all that in addition to MSOs, more MSOs, not the big two as much, but even they are increasing their build of fiber, and on and on, rural electrics and so forth, municipals. But of course, tier 2 and 3 telecoms as well are a big part. So where are we going from here? Why is fiber going to continue to be built out at this amazing pace? I think, first of all, it's because the internet is becoming more important. You can see from our tracking on the left, every year people say it's more important to their households. On the right is data from OpenVault and others earlier showing how the actual household data use per month keeps increasing. And all that means, that plays to fiber. And fiber is ever more differentiated. Probably many of you have seen these kinds of slides in previous years, but fiber always beats the others. We take speed tests and latency tests during our random surveys so we can compare, and fiber just continues to beat in every area. Net promoter scores we beat. There's some cases, the second currently is fixed wireless, or wireless in general. Sometimes fixed wireless even jumps ahead a little bit in areas where they had almost nothing, and now they have a fixed wireless option. But overall, fiber has the best NPS scores, and it's rated, even no matter what people have, nearly 60% say fiber is the best if it was available and the costs were similar. A couple other things, upload, one of the key differentiators for fiber broadband is upload speeds. And you can see on the left how from OpenVault data, the amount of increase is now way ahead of download speeds. It keeps increasing at a faster pace. And it hit me that, AI is all about data, and data has to be uploaded. So that's going to mean even more important to upload. And in fact, ChatGPT agreed with me, saying it's going to go up 2 to 10% over the next 5 to 10 years. But you think about all the things, and a lot of it's high definition video, even taking video of your car engine to help get it diagnosed, or having cameras in your yard which are processing for humans, and uploading financial or health data or whatever to try to get a deeper dive into suggestions and what your condition is. All those things take upload. So that's just means the fiber advantage of upload speeds becomes more and more important. The speed itself, being able to offer 1 gigabit or 2 gigabits or 10 gigabits, soon 25 and 50, fiber is just unique in that. And one thing people don't realize, a lot of people have tried to position the fact that it's not necessary. I can do all these tasks even on 100 megabits or even 50 megabits or whatever. That's not the point. The main point about, as we've done in a previous white paper, is that it's all about productivity. And you may not realize it, but if you have too low a speed, and discounting the streaming part of your usage, but the interactive part where you're trying to upload things and download things, you're waiting. You're waiting 2 seconds here, 2 minutes here, if you don't have that speed. So that's a reason to sell fiber in general. It's also a reason to help push people up into higher speed tiers available from a fiber provider. If time is important to you, and it is to most people, a gigabit or more is important today. Another thing, looking at the incentives, we're just seeing huge incentives out there for broadband. The new tax bill has depreciation raised to 100% bonus depreciation, which means companies can write off more of their capital investments and their earnings, and have more money to spend on capital investments, which, based on last time that happened and other analysis, that's going to mean a lot of companies, and they have already announced it, say they're going to go up 5%, 10%, 15% because of this. And of course, the public investment, some of us are disappointed in BEAD not funding as many percent fiber as we would have liked. Nonetheless, there's still a lot out there, and there's still fairly long rural builds that they're building, pretty large matches involved in those. So all that means there's more pressure and more opportunity to get more out there. And again, talking about third passings, this will continue. People that have to be the second or third, Altice Optimum, for example, 84%, they're going against a fiber provider, but they're still creeping up their intake rates, and the overall take rate keeps, for fiber in that case, keeps increasing about 61% now, and likely increase. In other words, eventually, if we have 3 providers in some cases, fiber is probably going to get 99% of those, that kind of thing. So it still works. We're seeing that fiber is winning wherever it's available. From our consumer studies, we asked, did you change because of a move, or you just felt like you needed to change? In cases where there's no fiber available, such as the left side, you can see that cable does win still, and fixed wireless. Taking away from that, DSL, even fiber, and you may say, why fiber? But that is people that had a fiber connection in some other area and moved to an area that doesn't have fiber. Where fiber is available, the net churn is 36%. Taking away people that left fiber and went to fiber, 36%. Cable loses in big time, as does DSL and, of course, satellite and so forth. Fiber clearly is winning. That pretends great problem for cable. Currently, only about 55% of the country is of the cable connections are passed with fiber. As that increases rapidly, I think the losses that they've been seeing will only increase. With that said, the delivery type, in other words, delivery by cable for the last mile, not necessarily the company, the delivery type, the red has been winning for a long time. After, it was tied for DSL for a while, it's been winning for the last 10 years or so. But now fiber's coming up there, and it's probably going to cross very soon, probably 2028 or thereabouts, where fiber takes the lion's share. Obviously, can't go through this slide in detail in the time we have, but the addressable market for fiber is still very large. VCTI, a company that we've worked with before, that good company that does information and mapping and so forth, helped us divide zip codes by BSLs. So we divided those in third, the most urban to the least urban. We also took income and divided that in third in each category, and took a look at the addressable market that's still out there for first passings. There's still some very promising areas, that opportunities for fiber for first passings. Then we looked at second passings, and this is more speculative, but we think there's a big opportunity for, especially in more dense areas and especially in more affluent areas, for second and third passings. So it could be lower, it could be higher, but that's our current estimate, 69 million. All in all, still 129 million with the assumption to go. And of course, in the blue colors, you can see as you go more rural, the take rates tend to increase. So that helps offset to some degree the higher costs. With that said, more and more in competition, fiber providers need to up their game. NPS scores are good, but they need to be even better. We need to be looking at ways to, A, have the most reliability, B, have good service when it is down. And one thing we've noticed in surveys of both fiber and other things, if you have fairly good reliability, but when you do have a problem, it gets fixed correctly and fast and with good communication, your net promoter scores actually go up. So handling it correctly is very important. And trust is another big one. Some of the big companies have given up the trust of consumers, unfortunately, trying to keep their revenue up in the short term, changing promises they've made to customers. So lots of opportunities for better fiber. So I want to end it up just talking a little bit about the opportunities beyond fiber to the home, because there are so many. And even though fiber to the home is going to be reaching a more mature, very fast pace in the next few years, but even beyond that, there's great opportunity for fiber. Just picking out a couple of them, fiber to the tower. There's only so much spectrum to do. There's only so much beam aiming can do. Eventually, we're going to have to go to densification, which means more cells, which means more fiber. It has to be fiber in most cases to those cells. So lots of opportunities there. Fiber to the room. As we go up in bandwidth, eventually it's going to be very hard for wireless to deal with that going through walls. So we're going to have to get to fiber to the room eventually, and starting out with new homes and retrofitting after that. But that's almost certainly something that's going to happen. Just picking another one, fiber as a sensor, very important new technology. You know, I used to play as a young adult child with sensors, microphones, and optical switches and so forth, thermostats. But it's amazing, you can use a fiber now continuously and make the whole thing that microphone or that temperature sensor. And you can even tell exactly in the fiber where something is occurring. And the need's never been greater, everything from accidental cuts with all the activity underground going on to purposeful cuts, terrorism, and even international terrorism possibilities. It's very important to protect assets. And now, you know, a lot of times fiber is being built in right-of-ways along with other assets and near roads that also could be sensed. So the cost of this can be spread among many types of users. So lots of excitement in that area as well. So finally, one of the things we started looking at is the fiber to the data center. Everybody talks about the constraints of power and cooling and land and chips and so forth. But fiber is also a constraint. There's not enough capacity currently between these data centers and, of course, to the new data centers to handle all that. And so we did some initial analysis. It looks like 92,000 new miles of fiber will need to be built, route miles, and that's 213 million fiber miles when you look at these cables that now have hundreds or thousands of fiber in a single cable, and those cables are getting smaller all the time. So lots of opportunity there, and even opportunity for small providers, because a lot of these data centers are built out in the middle of rural areas where they need to have 3 or 4 paths out to ensure uptime and redundancy. And who knows that better than local providers in a rural area? So lots of opportunities for everyone. We're going to be excited to track some of these things in the future. With that, you know, I just say there's no industry today, I think, more important or exciting or foundational to our future than fiber broadband. Anyone that's listening to this Fiber for Breakfast should be excited about being involved in something that's not only making them a living, but is really making a difference in the world today. With that, Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
Mike, as always, great work. And I'll start off with, you know, you and I spent a lot of time talking about what the potential is for deployment on an annual basis. And we've been kind of talking about 12 million homes passed per year being kind of the limit, constrained by workforce development and some other things. You know, we're at 11.8. Are we at the limit, or are we going to see us blow by 12 million homes next year?
I think there's certainly a good possibility of blowing by it. To what extent, I don't know, because there are constraints. You know, there's the workforce constraints. Permitting constraint is a continuing problem. In certain cases, materials could be a problem. We don't think is, you know, everybody's working hard to try to make that not happen. And people, I think, are going to be more reluctant to overbuy given what they did a few years ago. But you know, there will be constraints. So we haven't done our forecast yet for next year. We do a forecast report in the spring, but it's going to be difficult to forecast. But I do know it's going to be higher than it is today with all the pressure out there.
Well, it's just, you know, with the BEAD being delayed another year, it's just amazing how 2025 with private investment is really, you know, got to that 11.8 million homes passed. It's amazing. So a number of people asked about the deck. Yeah, we will send the slides out to everyone who in the audience today, so you guys will get a copy of this. It's always great work that you can look at over and over again and find new stuff that's interesting. Yeah, there was a question about the term BSL, broadband serviceable locations. That's a term that's been used with the FCC mapping and so forth. So just basically identifying you know, what homes are available for fiber or other broadband services. Is that how you look at that term, Mike?
Yes, exactly.
So one of the questions I thought was, well, a lot of great questions, but I think you may have answered this, but our good buddy Fred had asked about the business case for additional fiber passings. I know in Huntsville, we were begging for fiber, and then when Google Fiber and Huntsville Utilities got fiber out to everybody, then all of a sudden I had 4 passings in my house because AT&T and Comcast and all kinds of other people were, it's like a Burger King on one corner and McDonald's on the other, or Eckerd's and Walgreen or things like that. But what is the business case for, more than one passing?
Well, there's always a business case for more than one provider, and they can do different things, different degrees of customer service, and different features, and different bundles, and bundling, and so forth. So there's always a need. But I think the point is, fiber, barring some physics breakthrough that is not imaginable right now, fiber is going to be the best way to do it. And this is not a static thing where we've now reached the maximum amount of broadband we're going to need. It keeps going up and up and up. So most people have recognized they need to compete with fiber. And so even the cable companies, the small and the mid-sized cable companies, are moving to fiber. The larger two are also moving. They're slower. They're still believing in DOCSIS 4.0, this new way to get a little more speed and get their upload speeds up. I personally don't think that's going to make a big difference. It's been delayed, and I think they're still going to have to eventually look at fiber. So they'll be probably in the game, the big 2 cable companies. But there is a business case. Obviously, if you get too many in a place, it could get overboard, but the market's going to have to figure that out. What's the maximum, depending on the demographics that should be trying to compete. But there is a business case for more than one fiber provider.
So one of the questions I think is really interesting is, can you zip to your public investment slide? Does this only reflect announced programs, or is it anticipated programs? And what is your thought on that?
It doesn't have anything that has not been officially kicked off, so it does not include something and this is an estimate, of course, so it's not perfect, but the point is there's a lot of investment from the past efforts that is kind of peaking in about 2026, plus the BEAD finally coming online. So, but it does not include something that's just being talked about.
Yeah, I certainly, what's not on this reflected here is, the 21 or 22 billion from the leftover BEAD funds that will get deployed in one way or the other. So we certainly see a lot of AI critical infrastructure that would help support that. The also state and local funds that are things that they didn't get, through the other funding programs that they might have built out. But certainly from the government's perspective is, the Congress intent with the infrastructure bill was to, have the final funding done. But as we've seen, especially when you don't put fiber in, you have to subsidize the same areas over and over again until you get fiber. All right, so our friend Ryan was asking, all right, in the remaining unpassed urban homes, which percent of those are MDUs, multi-dwelling units, apartments, and so forth? How many of these fiber passings are technology versus business arrangements with the building owner? And obviously, that's an astute question.
Yeah. So MDU units are below single family in terms of the numbers passed. It also gets a little tricky in the way people report it. Are they really reporting fiber to the unit or fiber to the floor with the last part by Wi-Fi or coax or something? But there are a lot of MDU units that do have fiber. There's still opportunity there. We've tried to kind of estimate the opportunity, but that's not from as solid data. It comes from our consumer study and so forth, which has more error. But there certainly is a lot of opportunity for MDU. As far as the other question was about, obviously you get into the problem of MDUs only making a deal with one provider, multiple providers, all those things come into play, if that was the question.
All right, well, thanks. So a lot of interesting questions here. I think this one's kind of interesting on the feel for fiber demand for unmanned combat aerial vehicles. We in Europe, when we work with the Fiber to the Home Council Europe, there's a big. So Ukraine is actually using fiber on drones. So it's very easy to use some electromagnetic pulses and things to knock anything that's uses any kind of wireless controls. And so they actually tether drones with a fiber to be able to penetrate into enemy territory without getting it using some kind of way to block the Wi-Fi or not Wi-Fi, the wireless signals. So I don't know, how big do you think a market is it for putting fiber on aerial, for the military to put on aerial vehicles?
Yeah, I haven't actually studied that. I think that is an interesting. It's amazing that they spool out that fiber and can go quite a ways, even with a missile or a drone. But I don't know. Obviously, it's going to be, I think, relatively small relative to some of these other markets, but it's another very interesting market.
There's a lot of questions about BEAD and the 22 billion, 21 billion that are left over. And, certainly we've seen, I've met with NTI, Ariel Roth recently, and there is an appetite to put some investment into taking care of permitting and trying to streamline permitting and permitting reform. So I think that's a opportunity. Certainly we've been pushing workforce development. We've been pushing more fiber for AI infrastructure. Certainly there's some areas that are still kind of fell through the cracks. So I want to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind if this is the last big tranche of government funding. And so I think the good news is, that we're seeing the administration and Commerce now talking about opportunities for non-deployment funds or these leftover funds. So and the fear of those going away, it doesn't seem to be. It looks like that they will be used for the industry. Tons and tons of questions here. Maybe Mike, you can help address these online, but let me just hit one about. There's also with all this supply chain. So AI has been going crazy, huge demand for fiber. What is your thought on the availability of fiber with all the demand for AI?
Yeah, I know it's a tough problem, and I know that the fiber providers are trying to meet the needs, but also reserve fiber to meet the BEAD need and the market need. So I don't know the exact answer. I hope that they are right, that there is enough fiber out there to meet these needs. And I know they've been working hard to try to make that happen. Of course, the BABA requirements make it a little more complicated in the BEAD case. But I think we're in reasonably good shape. But and hopefully people won't overreact and overbuy and that kind of thing. After the pain that they caused themselves back in about 3 years ago, doing the same thing. So it could be a concern, but I think we're all just going to have to stand back and watch. I know people are trying to increase cable production. Glass production is harder to increase quickly, but there is a lot of production in the U.S. and throughout the world, and some of that can flow into the U.S. as well.
So one thing that you didn't show today, as you showed last week, is that the supply chain has normalized. That we had the big run up from COVID, and you want to say a few things about that?
Yeah. So we had some shortage before COVID where things were heating up, and that caused people to overbuy. And you can actually see it on a chart where the fiber deployment of FTTH products went down for a while because of unavailability, and then they spiked way up. And people may recall the stock market went crazy. People overestimated that was the normal, and a lot of it was just overbuying to try to protect themselves after that previous experience. Then they got caught with all this inventory, and for a while, a lot of the vendors were saying, where's all this work that you're talking about? Nobody's buying because they were drawing down that over inventory. And you could actually see it on the chart that went way up and went way down, and now it's back to kind of the trend line. So we're in a pretty good spot right now. With the amount of build, it's not easy ever to get actually normalize this and everything, but I know everybody's trying really hard to do that.
All right, well, Mike, thank you so much. And for everybody, thanks for joining us today. Hopefully we can get back together next Wednesday. I think that's Christmas Eve or something like that. But we're going to be with Jessica Koch, from Consolidated Business Services, and our conference committee chair, and then Evan Freeman, who's with EPB and also on our board, to talk about the Fiber Broadband Association's events for 2026. So it's going to be the big reveal. We have some amazing things planned for 2026. So you want to hear what Jessica and Evan have to say. So thanks everyone for joining us. Mike, as always, great work and really interested in everything that you do for us. So thank you.